it's Hope and welcome to the video. As you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, this is going to be my July wrap-up and stats. Also, this is, I think, going to officially be the background and where I'm filming in my new place. I'm literally in my living room being able to film, which has never happened before. My last video was filmed in my living room, but I've never just been able to film anywhere in the house and not have somebody judge me. Yes, my roommate's currently at work, but even then, if she was in her room, she would just be like, yeah, my best friend's weird, moving on. But moving past that, again, this is my July wrap-up and stats. So first we're gonna jump into the stats. I'm going to be looking down at my laptop down here so that I'm saying the stats correct. But yeah. So in July, I read 10 books, which accumulated to 3,745 pages. My average star rating was exactly a 4-star. I read 1 contemporary, 2 dark romances, 2 fantasies, 1 fantasy romance, 1 graphic novel, and 3 romances. For the formats, 1 audiobook, 6 ebooks, and 3 physical books. And for the audiences, 3 were adult, 3 were new adult, and 4 were YA. So the first book, I started this in June, but I finished it in July. But I read most of it in July, so I'm counting it for July, is Theirs Ever After by Katie Robert, which I gave 3.5 stars. This is the 3rd book, I think it's the Thalian Dynasty series. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm too lazy to look. But in the very first book, Theirs for the Night, we are following Meg, Theo, and Galen as they kind of have a one-night stand of sorts in New York. And then in the second book, I think it's like 3 or 4 months later, they're rekindling, and it is a MMF, like polyamorous story. They're all together in a relationship. Theo is an exiled prince from a country that doesn't actually exist in our world. Galen is his best friend slash bodyguard, and Meg is a girl that they meet in a bar. I believe she was like a bartender, and so Meg gets thrown into the world of royalty, and it's them all dealing with their dynamic while people are not liking that there are 3 people on the throne instead of just your classic 2. And I did enjoy this. It just didn't blow me away. I think my favorite book in the series is book 2 because it's a lot of just discovering that relationship and that relationship dynamic, whereas this, I feel like it fell flat in a few places, but I still did enjoy it. The next book is Shut Out by Avery Keelan, which is the 2nd book in the... Is it the Rules of the Game series? That sounds right, but I need to check. Yeah, Rule of the Game. Which the first book is Offside, and then Shut Out is book 2, which in this we are following Tyler and Sarah. Sarah is the sister of the main male character in book 1, and Tyler is the main male character in book 1's best friend slash roommate. And so basically Sarah and Tyler had a one-night stand on Halloween in a bar, and then now Sarah is needing to switch universities, and so she ends up moving in with her brother and his 2 roommates, one of which is Tyler, and they have to kind of navigate their feelings while also being like, it's forbidden because, well, are you really gonna date and hook up with somebody that it wouldn't be approved of? And so they're sneaking around doing that, and I loved this so much. I gave it 5 stars because I loved Tyler and Sarah so much. Sarah is an ADHD mess who doesn't know what she's doing in life, and I'm like, same girl, same. And Tyler is a brooding goalie who has so much stress and pressure put on him from his family and just overall his need to succeed and to go pro, because he's a hockey player in college. I feel like I should have mentioned that earlier. So obviously it's a hockey romance, which I love, but it has so many of these other little like layers to it, and I just loved it so much. So yeah. The next book I read is The Summer I Turned Pretty. I listened to the audiobook, but I just own the book, so I'm just gonna hold it up. And basically in this, we follow Belly and her family who go to Cousins Beach every single summer to stay with her mom's best friend's family. And in this, there's a love triangle between Belly and Conrad and Jeremiah, Conrad and Jeremiah are her mom's best friend's sons. And it's very messy. And yeah, I reread this. I read it last year, but I reread it this year because of season 2 of the show coming out. I'm actually still currently reading book 2, and I've been reading it for like a month, but we're not gonna talk about that. But yeah, I give this 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it better the second time around. I think because I already had a grasp on the characters, and I guess I know what's happening in the book, maybe appreciate the things in the first book more, I think. I'm not too sure though, but I did really enjoy it. The next is The Grave Between Us by Tal Bauer, which is kind of almost like in some ways like a psychological thriller. Basically in the first book, The Murder Between Us, we are following Cole and Noah, and they basically get put on the same FBI investigation about a serial killer that like had gone cold for a few years and now has started picking up the killings. And they had a kind of like, not a one-night stand, but like a one-night flirting in Vegas a couple days before, and then not knowing who each other was, and then they're put on this case and they're having to navigate their feelings while also kind of dealing with the case. And this is the aftermath where in The Grave Between Us we are, I can't remember how many months later, but it's like at least 6 months later, as now there is a case from Cole's past that is affecting his relationship with Noah and all of that, and it's really good. I only gave it a 4 stars because I feel like there lacked that like there was romance in it, but it just wasn't as good as the first book, and I feel like they were just lacking a couple things that the first book had that I really liked. So I feel like I could only give it a 4 stars, but I still really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend this series for anybody who wants like in some ways it's kind of like a psychological thriller with romance, and you're dealing with like FBI agents trying to solve these murders, and you're dealing with all of the ins and outs of that I really enjoyed. So I do highly recommend it. The next book is Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare, which is the 3rd and final book in the Last Hour series. I finally got around to reading this like 6 months after it got released. Oops. But as I said, this is the 3rd book in the Last Hour series. The first book is Chain of Gold, where we are following a young group of shadow hunters in 1903 Edwardian London who are trying to solve these new demon attacks that have started occurring since 2 new shadow hunter families arrived in London. And this is obviously book 3, so we're kind of dealing with more of a complex storyline that I can't say. But oh my gosh, this book, I loved it and I hated it. I'll explain why. I only gave this a 4.5. I love the characters so much. I love everything that happened, but I hate how long it was, and of how a lot of the problems could have been solved if characters just fucking communicated. Like I don't know why. I'm like, the first like 2 books, the communications between the characters were a lot better than this, and I feel like it was just characters that communicated better in the first 2 books just decided, we're not going to communicate, which is going to fuck shit up. And here we are. Also, a character that I loved so much died. I'm not saying who, but a character dies in this, and I literally was fucking sobbing for a good 15 minutes because it honestly confused me so much, because I'm like, wait, what? Huh? No. And it's still confusing me because, without spoiling too much, but it's like, I thought that family line was gonna lead to down a family line for some of the other books, but now it's not. And so now I'm confused of how that family line continues. If you know, you know. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's just, I had a couple flaws, but the moments that I loved, I loved so much. But yeah, so only 4.5, which still is a good rating, but for me, I was expecting this to be 5 stars. Honestly, 4.5 is probably pushing it. It's probably closer to a 4, but I'm just gonna hold on to that 0.5 just for a little bit, but in a couple months, once my thoughts die down, it might go down to a 4, but I'm not sure. Next is Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. I'm not really gonna explain this because if you know me, you know I love this. Gave it 5 stars, obviously. This, basically, we follow Nick and Charlie as they go to an all-boys school together. They get put in the same form group and become friends, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It is a queer romance. I love it. I love Heartstopper so much. Eventually, I'm gonna get a tattoo for it. But in July, I started my reread for season 2 when it came out, which, as I'm filming this, obviously season 2 has come out. I finished my reread of the series, yada yada yada. But when in doubt, I kind of needed just something quick and simple while moving that I could just sit and read in like an hour and just enjoy wholeheartedly. So I read this and obviously I loved it. The next book is Princess of Chaos by Angel Lawson and Samantha Rue, which I gave 4 stars. This is the 7th book in the Royals of Forsyth University series, but the first book in the Princes part of the series, because it's like a series of trilogies, if that makes any sense. And so in this, we are following the princes, which are basically like, think of almost like, in some weird ways, it's fucked up fraternities almost, of how like each fraternity is like based on a royalty title, but it's a lot fucked up, it's dark, it's not what you would normally expect. And in this, basically, we are following Verity, who basically gets chosen to be the princess, and in doing so, part of the prince's legacy, I guess we'll call it, is procreating in college. And it is very much just a fuck ton of smut, tied into a darker storyline. I honestly can never describe these books because I'm like, I don't even know what I read half the time, but they're amazing. I gave it 4 stars. I did really like the characters because they are all messed up in their independent ways, and I just love the characters. Overall, with all of the books in the Royals of Forsyth University series, I always love the characters and I love the character dynamics, but it's just like the overarching plot that my brain just goes, I don't know what's going on, we'll see where it goes. But I did like it. The next book, I actually DNF'd, which is A Duel with the Vampire Lord by Elise Kova. So this is the 3rd book in the Married to Magic series, which is basically, the Married to Magic series is kind of like a series of standalones that take place within the same world, of almost like, in some ways they are like retellings, in some ways. And so this is basically, I honestly can't describe it really, but we are following a girl that was raised to kind of in some ways be a vampire hunter, who ends up crossing paths with the vampire lord and gets taken by him, essentially. And that's pretty much as far as I got, because it's not that I didn't like the book, it's just, I think I picked it up at the wrong time. And so thus I didn't really care about anything because I wasn't in the right mindset to read it. When in doubt, I'm in like, not a fantasy slump, but just like, I need to be fully invested into the fantasy I'm reading. And I was reading 2 fantasies, and so my brain was like, picked one and is like, that's the only fantasy I can focus on. Anything else I'm not going to care about. And unfortunately, A Duel with the Vampire Lord was the one that I kind of was like, I don't care about. I also think I just had a hard time connecting with the characters and enjoying them, thus I didn't like it that much. I do think in the future I will go back and retry it because I'm interested in the next book in the series, which is about like sirens and all that, and I'm interested in that. But my brain goes, you have to finish book 3 before you can read book 4. So I might retry this later this year or next year, but I'm not too sure. The next book is There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark, which is the second book in, I believe it's the Sinner's Duet, which basically in the first book, There Are No Saints, we are following Cole, who is a serial killer and an artist, and Mara, who is a struggling artist who ends up becoming the victim, or the attempted victim, I shall say, of a different serial killer. And Cole and Mara meet at a art gallery thing, and he immediately becomes interested because of knowing that she is the next attempted victim, and ends up saving her. And it is very dark, very fucked up. Obviously Cole is a serial killer, and Mara ends up getting corrupted, is that the right word, by his ways, and it is really good. I only gave it 3.5 stars though, because it ultimately, I'm trying to think of what I can say without spoiling it, but ultimately I feel like it just lacked what I wanted. I really wanted them to become this, like, honestly, this serial killing duet, like Bonnie and Clyde type-esque thing, but ultimately it was just like, oh yeah, we're gonna get revenge on this one person, but a bunch of the things that strung it together just felt flat, and honestly I wanted it to be darker than it was, which sounds weird because it's a book about a literal serial killer, but I just wanted it to be a tad bit darker and more fucked up, and it just kind of fell flat. So 3.5. Doesn't mean I didn't like it. I still really liked it, but it's just, it fell flat in a couple aspects. And the final book I read in July, but I finished it in August, but I read most of it in July, is Fable by Adrienne Young, which basically in this we are following Fable, who at 14 years old, she was dumped on this island by her father, and now we are, is it 4 years later? No, it's 3 years later, and Fable now wants to try to get back to her father to kind of ask why, and so she ends up joining this ship of people who she's been trading with for the last few years, and ultimately, how do I even describe what happens in this? Jesus Christ. But ultimately she ends up kind of joining this crew, and there's a bunch more stuff going on in this. I'm really struggling to describe it because I don't know why. It's like, it's an easy and simple book. Like, it's very YA. I gave it 3 stars, but I'm struggling to describe it for some reason, because there's many layers to it. Like, there is the fact that it's a lot about getting revenge of sorts and trying to appease bargains and dealings and all of that. And while this is a fantasy, technically, because it takes place in a fantasy world, it is very, like, comforting. I don't know why, because everything is so simplistic that it was just so easy to read. But again, because it was so simplistic, that's kind of why it's only a 3-star. But I do plan on continuing the sequel. It's literally right up there. I might try to read it in the next couple months before the, like, things that happen in this book kind of fizzle off in my brain. But I did enjoy it. I do really like the characters and the character dynamics and the relationship that kind of started to form at the end of this book. Like, I really like that. But yeah, I don't really have any other thoughts on it. So yeah, those are the books that I read this month. Let me know what is one book that you read in July, or if you've read any of these books that I've read. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps my channel grow, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!